Number 8. The Sunken Hollow and Volcanic Hollow. So if we're talking about the uniqueness of a map, there is certainly nothing like the Sunken Hollow and the Volcanic Hollow. These are locales with the exact same layout, since they're the same geographic location. The difference is that the flow, or lack of flow, of molten lava results in enormous changes to atmosphere, color palettes, and monster variety. The typical reason why there's a disparity here is because this cave system was actually carved out by the lava flow from a nearby volcano, and the Sunken Hollow is what the place looks like when said volcano is dormant. However, there's an added story context to this disparity within the events of Monster Hunter 4. In the particular point in time in which you go to this region, a Nerscylla has used its webbing to block off the tunnels that the lava would usually flow from with giant boulders, and the locals need this Temnoceran gone so that they can light up their forges again. Defeating Nerscylla will unlock quests that swap the Sunken Hollow into the Volcanic Hollow. There is no season or time limit effect in Monster Hunter 4 though, and for the rest of the game you'll just load into whichever version of the map is specified by the accepted quest. So this is kinda sick already. It's a location with a separate variation of itself. Both versions have different tones to them and different monsters who live there. It's a location that was carved out by a separate natural landmark, and there are both ecological and narrative reasons behind the swapping of the two states. Monster Hunter doesn't really have anything else quite like that. Even the massive weather events that we're going to be getting in Wilds can't quite impact the maps on the same level that this dual state locale can. The sandstorms of the Windward Plains can certainly alter the behaviors of the animals who live there, but when the volcano near the hollow comes to life, the entire ecosystem of this region changes. Several species will just vacate the Sunken Hollow completely, and a number of more volcanic-oriented animals will then take their place. It's kinda neat to think about the off-screen transition between the two states that we don't actually get to see. The different lighting and color for the two maps not only do a great job in giving both states of the Hollow different tones, but are also excellently executed individually. The Sunken Hollow uses a huge mixture of shades of brown, gray, tan, yellow, orange, and red to make the place look visually appealing while still being a dark, dank, earthy underground cave system. It's a pretty deceptively colorful place in its own dour sort of way. There are also a few zones with some luminescent fungus and glowing blue pools of water, as well as some plant life on the upper levels to add these extra shocks of color here and there. There's a great mixture of earthy colors on display here, as well as this huge presence of sulfuric yellow to some of the lower regions. Then the Volcanic Hollow takes on a much more simple color palette. It focuses on darker browns and grays that are lit up with a moody and hellish mix of reds, oranges, and yellows. The lava, being the chief source of lighting in these caverns, means that the tone down here is far more sinister than the sunken variation of this place. And some of the scenic views you can get from the top regions of the Hollow are absolutely apocalyptic. There's a lot of other awesome little bits and pieces around the place too. There's a couple of bogs and mires down in the Hollow, and a couple of large crystal formations, some aforementioned glowing fungal structures, and of course the absolute regional dominance that Nerscylla holds over the upper regions of the Hollow. Despite only being a lowered mid-level difficulty monster, Nerscylla feels like she is the top-level predator of the Sunken Hollow. She has 3 zones absolutely covered in her spiderwebs for her to play around with and utilize her unique methods of fighting and maneuvering around a battlefield. And you absolutely cannot forget one of the most gnarly aspects of visual storytelling that Monster Hunter has to offer. Nerscylla's nests are littered with the strung up and skinned corpses of Gypsaros, the bird wyvern she uses to craft her protective electricity-resistant cloaks and solidified poison crystals. Unfortunately, since Nerscylla doesn't stick around when the caverns flood with lava, her zones, and honestly the majority of the upper levels of the Sunken Hollow, go severely underutilized in the volcanic version of the map. And since the Volcanic Hollow is the only version of this map that made its way into Monster Hunter Generations, it feels like a weirdly bloated map in that game, specifically in terms of zone count. I think Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate needed a new fire subspecies or two that could adequately use these big netted areas in the Volcanic Hollow. In fact, why can't Ash Ketchawacha go here? That'd make sense. There probably also maybe needed to be like a fire Nerscylla or something. Maybe a different Temnoceran completely for this section. It's too bad Raknakadaki arrived a whole generation too late to help out here. The best you can get with these upper regions of the Volcanic Hollow are versions of Rathalos and Yangaruga. It's not the end of the world, but it's definitely an issue with the map. Most of the volcanic beasts like Uragan, Gravios, Teostra, and Brachydios are just too damn big and heavy to be up on the spider webs and traversing the higher cliffs of the hollows. The sunken version of this map doesn't really have these issues. It's got Nerscylla, Ketchawacha, and Congalala on the vines and on the webs. The Wraths and a few other flying wyverns can go up into the cliffs, and the caverns and the bogs are all filled with monsters like Kezu, Gypsaros, Tetsukabra, and Gendrome. The music for the Sunken Hollow is pretty solid. It's not super melodic and mostly just uses percussion to drive itself forwards, while using strings and reverb on some of the instruments to create a creepy, echoing element for the place. Sells a battle in a deep, dark, forgotten cavern pretty well, though it's certainly not the most memorable track that Monster Hunter has to offer. The Volcanic Hollow track, on the other hand, kinda stinks. It's super similar to the Sunken version, but it's pitched down and slowed down. The Sunken Hollow track was already not very fast or very high-pitched. This one just feels meandering and plodding. Even the percussion isn't as strong. Wrapping things up with positives though, the battle zones here are pretty high quality across the board. There's plenty of ledges and climbable surfaces and spiderwebs to make use of in just about every area. The only area I don't really like is 3. It's a cave with a huge column in the middle, and it isn't a particularly big zone without that column. It's okay enough when you have something like Gypsaros or Kezu running up that pillar to attack you from the ceiling, but anything bigger than that is going to make this zone annoying really fast. This place does, however, have an excellent massive zone, that being Area 8, which is a highlight specifically for the Volcanic Hollow, and is very often used. It's a great place for fights that need a lot of room to breathe. Things like Tigrex, Deviljo, Glavenus, Ignactor, and Gravios. They're all usually here pretty often too, so it's fun to fight them here. This zone has a lot of great elevation changes, so the gameplay doesn't feel dull, and lets the bigger monsters just kinda do their stuff. The Nerscylla zones 4, 5, and 6 are awesome when you're fighting her there. 2 is a pretty cool area that's a little bit more claustrophobic and intense without being obnoxiously narrow, and Area 9 is a pretty great nest area with tons of destructible rocks that can be turned into hazardous lava pools. There's nothing quite like the Volcanic and Sunken Hollow, and there may never be again. Despite the Sunken Hollow version very much feeling like the more fleshed out state of the map, and its absence being felt in Generations, this combo is a memorable standout of Monster Hunter 4. It's got some excellent combat, memorable visual storytelling, and handles 2 differing sets of color, lighting, and atmosphere expertly, despite having the exact same layout on both maps. Cheers to the art department for this one.